After my husband Michael passed, I took the nest egg he left for me, every last dime meant for my own old age, and I gave it to my daughter Brianna. I gave it to her so she could have the one thing she wanted more than anything in this world. I handed over my future so she could have hers. And you know how she thanked me? She called me 2 days before the gender reveal, the party I'd been dreaming of since the day she told me the treatment worked, and she told me not to come. Said my sadness over her daddy, my grief for the man who gave her everything, was just too much of a downer for her happy day. She thought she was cutting me out, putting my sorrow in a box so it wouldn't mess up her party decorations. What she didn't know was that the fertility doctor, the man holding the one secret she was desperate to know about her own child, was my Michael's best friend from childhood. And he was about to honor a promise he made to my husband under a starry sky a long, long time ago. My life with Michael. Lord, where do I even begin? It wasn't a movie, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. 32 years of real. It was the smell of coffee brewing at 6 in the morning because he knew I couldn't start my day without it. It was finding a little yellow sticky note on the bathroom mirror with a silly face drawn on it just because it was a Tuesday. It was the sound of him humming Stevie Wonder, always a little off-key, while he washed the dishes after dinner. He'd sway his hips and sing signed, sealed, delivered I'm yours to the back of a greasy pan, and I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, laughing so hard my sides ached. Those little moments, they don't seem like much when you're living them. They're just the bricks you're laying, one by one. It's only when the builder is gone that you look back and see the beautiful, strong house you built together. And you realize that house is now empty, and the silence is the loudest thing you've ever heard. Michael was my rock. Not the kind of rock that just sits there, heavy and unmoving. He was the kind of rock that the river has to flow around, the one that changes the course of the water. I remember when I lost my job back in '08. The whole world felt like it was crumbling, and I was sure we were going to lose everything. I sat on the edge of our bed, just staring at the wall, feeling like I couldn't breathe. Michael didn't come in with a bunch of empty platitudes. He didn't say, "Don't worry, honey, it'll all be okay." He came in, sat on the floor in front of me, and took my hands in his. He just sat there. He sat with me in the fear, in the not okay. He let me cry until my eyes were swollen shut, and then he wiped my face with the sleeve of his shirt and said, "All right, Sarah. We're not okay right now. But we will be. And until we are, I'm right here." That was Michael. He didn't try to fix the storm. He held the umbrella over my head until it passed. We had so many plans. That was the cruelest joke of it all. For years, we'd talked about our retirement. We had a jar on the dresser where we'd put our spare change, and we called it the Redwood Fund. We were going to buy a small used RV, nothing fancy, just something with a good engine and a comfy bed, and we were going to drive across the country. He wanted to see the redwoods in California. He'd seen them in a magazine once and was just mesmerized. He'd say, "Can you imagine, Sarah? Something that's been on this earth longer than any of us, just reaching for the sky." He wanted to stand under them and feel small. And I just wanted to be there with him, holding his hand, feeling small together. We had it all mapped out. We'd saved. We'd planned. We'd built that nest egg, dollar by careful dollar, a testament to a lifetime of hard work and shared dreams. It was our money. It was for us. For our final chapter. And then, one day, the doctor called with test results, and all those chapters just burned up. The fight was short. Brutal. 6 months from diagnosis to the silence. And in that silence, all I had left were the memories and that nest egg, a pile of money that now felt like a monument to a future that would never happen. It's funny how your mind works when you're grieving. You don't just remember the big things. You remember the little, forgotten corners of your life together. And one memory in particular kept coming back to me after he was gone. It was from maybe 10 years ago. A warm summer evening, the kind where the air is thick and sweet with the smell of honeysuckle and charcoal. We were having a barbecue in the backyard. Just a few friends over. Brianna was a teenager then, probably 16 or 17, and I'm sure she was inside, sulking about something, texting her friends. But outside, the grown-ups were laughing. The tiki torches were lit, casting a warm glow on everyone's faces. I was sitting on the porch steps, and Michael was in a lawn chair next to his best friend, Dr. David Chen. David and Michael, they were brothers. Not by blood, but by choice. They'd known each other since they were 5 years old, had gotten into every kind of trouble a boy could find growing up. David was the smart, steady one. Michael was the dreamer, the one with the music in his soul. I remember watching them that night, two middle-aged men with beers in their hands, just talking. I was close enough to hear, but they were in their own little world. Michael started talking about his one big regret. He said, "You know, Davy, I ever tell you my granddaddy could play the piano without ever having a lesson? He had this ear. He could hear a song once and just play it. They said it was a gift. Michael had it too. He never pursued it, life got in the way, but he could sit down at an old piano and just create. Melodies would pour out of him like water from a spring. It was this beautiful, secret part of him." He looked at David, his eyes a little misty from the beer or the emotion I couldn't tell. He said, "It's a strange thing, that gift. A piece of my family's soul, I guess." Then he got real quiet for a minute. He looked over at David, who was a renowned fertility specialist, one of the best in the state. Michael said, "You bring new life into the world every day. It's a miracle what you do. A real, honest-to-God miracle." He took a long sip of his beer. "If anything ever happens to me, you look out for my girls. You hear me? Especially Brianna. She's got my fire, but sometimes she forgets where the wood comes from. Make sure she remembers where she comes from, the good parts." David didn't even hesitate. He bumped his bottle against Michael's and looked him square in the eye. His voice was low and serious. "Always, Mike, you know that. They're my family too. I'll always make sure they're taken care of." I remember smiling to myself on the porch steps. It was just a sweet, slightly tipsy moment between two old friends, a promise made in the warm glow of a summer night. I never thought anything of it. I figured it meant David would send a nice flower arrangement to the funeral and maybe check in on us once or twice. I had no idea that one day that promise would be the only thing holding me up when the whole world fell out from under me. I had no idea that Michael, in his own way, was still finding a way to hold the umbrella over my head. After Michael was gone, my world shrank down to the four walls of our house. My only real connection to the future, to life, was Brianna. She and her husband, Mark, had been trying for a baby for years. It was a silent heartbreak that had been shadowing their marriage. They'd been through so much. The hope, the disappointment, month after month. It was wearing them down, I could see it. It was making my daughter hard, brittle. One Sunday, they came over for dinner. I'd made Michael's favorite pot roast, and the whole house smelled like him, like us. After we ate, Brianna sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd laughed at her father's silly songs. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and Mark just stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder looking helpless. She laid it all out. They'd tried everything. They'd drained their savings. They'd taken out a second mortgage. They had one last shot. A specialized round of IVF with a clinic that had a sky-high success rate, but the cost. It was astronomical. It was a number that made the air go out of my lungs. She didn't ask directly. She was too proud for that. But she didn't have to. The question hung in the air between us, thick and heavy as humidity. "We're out of options, Mom." That's all she said. And I looked at my daughter, my only child, and I saw a pain that I understood. The pain of an empty future. And in my head, I heard two voices. One was Michael's, a quiet whisper of caution, reminding me that the money was for me, for my safety, for my old age. But the other voice, the one that was louder, was the sight of my daughter's desperate face. She was all I had left of him. How could I say no? How could I sit on a pile of money meant for a future I didn't even want anymore, a future without him, while she was suffering? The next day, I went to the bank. I remember the feel of the cold leather chair in the financial advisor's office. The air smelled of paper and quiet ambition. The young man across the desk from me had a kind face, but he looked at me with pity when I told him what I wanted to do. He pulled up the portfolio Michael had so carefully, so lovingly built over 30 years. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Each one a brick in the wall of security he had built around me. The advisor gently tried to talk me out of it. "Ma'am, are you sure? This is your retirement, once it's gone." I just nodded. "I'm sure," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. Signing those papers was like a betrayal. It felt like I was taking apart his life's work, his final act of love for me, and just giving it away. It was a second loss, a different kind of death. The death of the future he had planned for me. I walked out of that bank feeling hollowed out, lighter in a way that felt terrifying. When I transferred the money to Brianna's account, she called me sobbing. "Oh, Mom, thank you, thank you. I don't know what to say. You've given us a chance. You've given us everything." The gratitude was thick, overflowing. She and Mark came over, brought me flowers. We all hugged and cried. "You're going to be the best grandma in the world," Brianna said, her face buried in my shoulder. "This baby is going to be your whole world too, Mom. It'll be a new beginning for all of us." And I believed her. I clung to that promise like a life raft. I even told her, "You should go to Dr. Chen's clinic. David is the best. It would feel like your father is a part of this journey." She agreed immediately, saying it was a wonderful idea. For a few months, everything was beautiful. The treatment worked. She was pregnant. The joy that filled our lives was dazzling. It was the first real sunlight I'd felt since Michael's death. I was going to be a grandmother. A piece of Michael, a piece of me, would live on. I started knitting a little yellow blanket. I bought a tiny pair of sneakers and put them on the mantle, right next to Michael's picture. This baby wasn't just her new beginning. It was mine too. The gender reveal party was all Brianna could talk about. It was going to be a big affair at her and Mark's house. Caterers, decorations, dozens of friends. I was so excited I could barely sleep. I bought a new dress, a soft blue one that brought out the color in my eyes. I spent a whole afternoon picking out the perfect gift, a beautiful silver rattle from an antique store. I imagined holding my grandbaby, boy or girl, it didn't matter, and hearing that sweet little sound. I was living for this party. It felt like the finish line of all our collective pain and the starting line of all our future joy. 2 days before the party, my phone rang. It was Brianna. Her voice was different. Not excited. It was tight, hesitant. "Hey, Mom, you got a minute?" My heart did a little flip. "Of course, sweetie. Is everything okay? Is the baby okay?" Yeah, everything's fine," she said quickly. "It's just." Mark and I were talking. There was a long pause. I could hear her take a deep breath, like she was steeling herself. And then the words came. They didn't come out in a rush. They came out one by one, each one carefully chosen, each one a perfectly polished stone meant to hit its mark. "Look," she began, her voice taking on a strange, almost clinical tone. "We are so grateful for the money. We are. But this party, it's the start of our family. It's supposed to be a happy day, full of positive energy." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat had closed up. "And, well, you're still so sad all the time, Mom." Every time we're with people and you talk about Dad, the whole room just goes quiet. You bring this heavy energy with you everywhere you go. Heavy energy. My love for her father, my grief for my husband of 32 years, was heavy energy. I can't have that at my party, she continued, her voice gaining a chilling sort of confidence. I can't be worried about you crying in a corner or telling people stories about Dad that just bring everybody down. This is my day. It's about my baby and my future. It's not about him. It's not about your grief. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She was using my love for her father as a weapon against me. I need to protect my peace right now, she said, and that was the line that broke me. She was using the language of healing to inflict the deepest wound I had ever known. I'm sure you understand. It's just for this one event. We'll celebrate with you some other time, quietly. And then, before I could find my voice, before I could even form a word, she said, "Okay, gotta go, talk soon, And she hung up. The click of the phone echoed in the silence of my kitchen. I stood there, phone in my hand, staring at the little silver rattle sitting on my counter, all wrapped up in a bow. And in that moment, I felt a loneliness so profound, so absolute, it was like drowning in thin air. I had given her my past, my present, and my future. And she had thanked me by erasing me. The day of the party was the longest day of my life. The sun was shining, the sky was a brilliant cloudless blue. A perfect day for a celebration. My celebration. The one I had paid for in every way a person can pay. I sat in the living room, in Michael's old armchair, and the silence in the house was a physical weight. I could feel it pressing down on my chest. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't play any music. I just sat there, listening to the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a second of my life I was spending utterly alone. I tried to read a book, but the words just swam on the page. I tried to knit the little yellow blanket, but my hands were shaking too much. I felt like a ghost in my own life, haunting the rooms where I had once been so happy. Late in the afternoon, I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do. I picked up my phone and opened up social media. I knew it was a mistake, a form of self-torture, but I couldn't stop myself. And there it was. A picture, posted by one of Brianna's cousins. It was a group shot, taken in Brianna's backyard. There were dozens of people, all smiling, all holding champagne flutes. And in the center stood Brianna and Mark. She was glowing, her hand on her round belly. He had his arm around her, a grin plastered on his face. And all around them, a cloud of pink confetti was frozen in the air. A girl. I was going to have a granddaughter. I found out from a picture on the internet, like a stranger. I zoomed in on my daughter's face. She looked ecstatic. There was no trace of guilt, no hint of sadness that her mother wasn't there. She was perfectly, completely happy without me. And that's when I hit the bottom. It wasn't a dramatic fall. It was a quiet, sinking feeling. The realization that I had given every last piece of myself away until there was nothing left. I was invisible. I was a checkbook, a means to an end. And now that the end had been achieved, I was no longer needed. I put the phone down, curled up in Michael's chair, and for the first time since he died, I didn't cry. I was too empty to cry. Just as the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the living room floor, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer it. I didn't think I could bear to hear another voice. But I glanced at the screen, and the name made my heart stop for a second. Dr. David Chen. I hesitated, then swiped to answer, my voice a hoarse whisper. Hello? Sarah? It's David, how are you? His voice was so kind, so familiar. It sounded like Michael's. Not the sound of it, but the feeling behind it, the warmth. I'm okay, David, how are you? I was trying so hard to sound normal. I'm good. Hey, I was just calling. I was at Brianna and Mark's party for a little while this afternoon. I looked for you, but I didn't see you. Is everything all right? And that was it. That was the question that broke the dam. His simple act of noticing I was gone, of asking if I was okay. It was more kindness than my own daughter had shown me in weeks. The whole story just came pouring out of me. I told him everything. The money, the promises, the phone call. I told him the words she used. Heavy energy, a downer. I was sobbing by the end of it, ugly, gasping sobs. I was so ashamed, so humiliated. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a heavy silence, the kind that gathers before a storm. When David finally spoke, his voice had changed. The easy warmth was gone, replaced by something quiet and hard, like steel. Sarah, he said slowly. What she did to you, that's unforgivable. And she has no idea. She has no idea what she's just thrown away. What do you mean? I asked, wiping my eyes. When Brianna and Mark came to me, he explained, they had a list. A checklist for the donor. 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, a degree from an Ivy League school. They were building a designer baby, Sarah. They were looking at a resume, not a human being. I could hear the anger in his voice, a deep protective anger on my behalf. On Michael's behalf. I remembered my promise to Mike, he said, his voice softening just a little. I remembered what he said that night in the backyard. About his granddaddy, about the music in his soul. About making sure Brianna remembers where she comes from. He took a deep breath. So I did my own search. I went deep into the donor archives, past the superficial stuff. I spent weeks reading the extended profiles, the essays, the family histories. And I found him. A young man, a music student. And Sarah. His file had a note from the geneticist. He has a documented, incredibly rare genetic marker for perfect pitch. An almost savant-like aptitude for musical composition. The file said his own grandfather was a gifted, self-taught pianist. My hand flew to my mouth. I couldn't breathe. It was him, Sarah, David said, his voice thick with emotion. It was Michael's legacy. Brianna was so busy trying to manufacture a perfect future, she forgot to look at the beautiful pieces of her own past. I chose that donor for Michael. I did it so a piece of his soul, the best part of him, would live on in that baby. I did it for him. And I did it for you. I was speechless. Tears were streaming down my face again, but these weren't tears of sorrow. They were something else entirely. I'm sending you the file, David said. The official, anonymized donor profile. The one that highlights all the artistic and genetic data. It belongs to you. It's the story of a legacy she tried to erase. Just then, my computer in the other room made a soft dinging sound. The email had arrived. I had the truth. I held the story of my granddaughter's soul in my hands. A few months went by. The baby, a little girl they named Lily, was born. I saw pictures, of course. Brianna would send them in curt, infrequent text messages. She was a beautiful baby. But a wall of ice stood between us. Then about 2 months after Lily was born, Brianna started calling me. The calls were strange at first. Overly sweet. Full of questions about my day, my health. It was a transparent, clumsy attempt to warm me up. I knew what she was doing. She was fishing. Finally, one day, she got to the point. You know, Mom, she said, her voice casual, it's so funny. Lily has the most amazing reactions to music. The pediatrician is just floored. I was just wondering, you're so close with Dr. Chen. Did he ever happen to mention anything special about the donor's background? Like what school he went to or anything? There it was. She wasn't looking for a connection. She was hunting for prestige. She wanted to be able to tell her friends that her daughter's biological father went to Harvard or Yale. She wanted a brand name for her designer baby. "Why don't we meet for coffee?" I said, my voice perfectly calm. "We can talk then." We met at a little cafe downtown. I got there first and chose a small table in the corner. When Brianna walked in, pushing Lily in a stroller, I felt a pang in my chest. My granddaughter. But I held my ground. I had spent the last few months not just grieving, but healing. I had reconnected with old friends. I had started volunteering at the local library. I was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding a life for myself, a life that didn't revolve around being a mother or a widow. I was becoming Sarah again. When she sat down, I was no longer the fragile, weeping woman she had dismissed on the phone. I was calm, I was centered. I knew my own worth, and it had nothing to do with her. She launched into her monologue, gushing about Lily's advanced development, about how she was sure the baby was a genius. She kept circling back to the donor, to his obviously superior genes. I let her talk. I let her lay all her shallow materialistic ambitions out on the table between us. When she finally paused to take a breath, I reached into my purse and pulled out a thin manila folder. I slid it across the table. "What's this?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "It's the donor profile," I said quietly. "David sent it to me. He thought I should have it." Her eyes lit up. She snatched the folder and opened it eagerly, her eyes scanning the pages, searching for the Ivy League keywords she was so desperate to find. I watched her face as she read. I saw the excitement curdle into confusion and then into disappointment. She was looking for Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Instead, she was reading about innate musicality, perfect pitch, documented genetic markers for artistic aptitude. She was seeing a soul, not a status symbol. She looked up at me, her face a mask of bewilderment. "I don't understand," she whispered. "This is all about music." I took a sip of my coffee and met her gaze. My voice was soft, not a drop of anger or triumph in it. It was just the simple, unvarnished truth. "You were looking for a resume," I said. "David was looking for a soul. Your father's soul." Her eyes widened. "You were so worried about the downer of his memory that you didn't realize his memory was the most valuable gift you could ever receive. The one thing that made your father so special, that beautiful music inside him. That's the gift he's given your daughter. Through the love of a true friend." I leaned forward just a little. "You wanted to start your new beginning by erasing your past. But the one person you threw away, your father's best friend, was the only one who made sure the best part of that past was in your child's future." I let that sink in. I could see the truth of it dawning on her, the full weight of her mistake. "This information," I said, tapping the folder gently with my finger, "the story of where that beautiful gift comes from. That was my story, to tell my grandchild. That was supposed to be me, sitting with her at a piano one day, telling her all about her wonderful grandfather. You didn't want me, so you don't get the story." I stood up from the table. I left the folder there, with her. I didn't need it anymore. The truth wasn't on the paper. It was inside me. I walked out of that coffee shop, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't look back. My life is different now. It's quieter, but it's my own. I sold the big house, the one filled with too many ghosts, and I bought a small condo with a balcony that gets the morning sun. I took a trip, by myself. I went to California, and I stood under the redwood trees. And Michael was right. You feel so small, but in the best possible way. You feel connected to something ancient and strong and beautiful. I've started taking a pottery class. My hands, which once knitted a baby blanket for a grandchild I barely know, are now covered in clay, shaping bowls and vases that are lopsided and imperfect, but they are mine. I am building a future for myself, with my own two hands. And I am at peace. And I learned something through all this. Something I want to share with you. Your worth. It's not something other people get to decide. Not your husband, not your boss, and Lord knows, not even your own children. It's not something they can give you, and it's not something they can take away. It's something you carry inside you, a little pilot light of your own soul that no one can put out unless you hand them the extinguisher. So if you're out there and you feel like you've been put on a shelf or made to feel small or like your story is over because one chapter ended, it's not. Pick up that pen, turn that page. Your best chapter might be the one you write for yourself, by yourself. And trust me when I tell you, it is worth the read.